So today is going to be the letter G, and first and foremost, we have to acknowledge G stands for great men in history. So happy Martin Luther King Day. And remember that he was all about love over fear and love over hate. And that he said, darkness cannot drive out darkness, and hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. So, and that is true. Truer words were never spoken. So it's time for relationships and dating from A to Z. The letter G. So let's see. What do we start here with? G-spot. I have so much to say about this. G-spot. Yeah, it's important as much as communicating about sex in general is important. And, you know, but I would say don't get caught up in too many myths around it. I think that, like, it's more important to actually talk to your partner about what works and what doesn't, because, you know, some women just like get irritated by that. So, I mean, I mean, physically irritated by like this sort of desire to go after the G-spot. And so, I would say, like, it's a good conversation to have, but it's not really like the end all and the be all. And, like, you know, it's like sort of like this great myth around the G-spot, you know? So yeah, always good conversation to have. Gonorrhea. Okay. So remember when I mentioned condoms the other day? Condoms work, people, and we now have bacteria-resistant gonorrhea floating around. So use condoms, okay? This is no fucking joke, all right? Like, this is a serious thing. Because, see, a lot of people, particularly if you're like in your 20s and 30s, a lot of people went through abstinence-only education. And the problem with that is that it wasn't just like, let's teach them to say no and that that's the best option. It was say no, and by the way, condoms don't work. Like, there was this really weird side dish of actual false information that is, oh, condoms don't work. So then what they do is they get kids like, you know, giving in to their desires to have sex, but not using condoms because they thought, well, condoms don't do anything. They don't work. And that's not true. Condoms really help with a lot of things. So yeah, including gonorrhea. All right. Gifts. Ooh, gifts. Okay. So gifts. Ooh. Gifts. For some people, gifts are their love language. Like, if you've ever read the 5 love languages, yeah, some people like quality time, some people like words of affirmation, some people like physical touch, some people like gifts, and I can't remember what the 5th one is. But it's a lovely way to kind of have a conversation about what feels like love to you. So, but one of the things that I want to say is that whether it's gifts or anything else, what giving a gift to somebody means, right, is that you thought of them, that you saw something and you thought of them, and you wanted to let them know that that you were present with them even when you weren't with them. And presence is love. Being in the present moment with somebody, whether it's that they are present with you when you're off on your day, or they're really present with you when you're spending time together. Whatever it is, presence feels like love. So presence is your present is kind of a real thing. So, you know, gifts, I think, you know, it's tricky because in the beginning of a relationship, you know, you don't want to like spend too much or have this big differential in gifts. And some people really stress about gifts. I usually like knock it out of the park for my boyfriend's birthday, but then Christmas is 6 days later, and I always feel really weird about whether my Christmas gifts are like good or not. I don't know. It's weird. But the most important thing is that you recognize that even if somebody's not the best gift giver, the point is that they were present with you. Thoughts of you were present to them if they saw something and got that. And also they took the time to Like, let's say, oh man, when you start dating in like October and then fucking Christmas comes around right away, and you don't know what to do, and you don't know like birthday gifts, or sometimes you start dating somebody, they got a birthday right away. Yeah, it's just really touchy. I would say that in the beginning, you're better off not going overboard, because sometimes the bigger issue about giving is actually receiving, and the person has trouble receiving a gift without feeling some sort of obligation or like, oh shit, there's a lot more meaning to this than there is. So I would say in the very beginning, try to keep gifts thoughtful but relatively inexpensive. I think that that's kind of the way to go. I mean, I know there's probably some women that are like, hell no, get me a diamond bracelet on the third date. I don't care. But you know, I think if we're talking about kind of like your basic, your average income group, I would say keep the spending at a range that is like, you know, not much more than a dinner or something like that, you know, so where you can show appreciation and thoughtfulness. I think that's the most important thing with gifts, really, is the thoughtfulness when it comes to relationship. Okay, I'm talking too long on that one. Guilt. The first thing that comes to mind for me is that everybody in their own family of origin has a different experience of like what they feel guilt around, whether it's sex or money or asking for attention. And here's what's interesting is that you can have that feeling of guilt, let's say around sex, and now what I've experienced is that, let's say if somebody grows up with a lot of guilt around sex, and then they want to be able to have like a normal sex life, or they want to be able to engage in it guilt-free, but they can't, like they're still dealing with the guilt. And then they start to behave in response to that, and you don't really know what's going on. And because they're actually a little bit ashamed of the fact that they have guilt. So it can be so many layers, you know? Like I said, you can feel guilty about wanting attention, but you're with a partner who wants to give you attention, and then you start to push them away because you're feeling guilty about wanting attention. So like guilt is a fucked up emotion. What it does is it gets us out of our authenticity. It gets us out of our truth, because it's hard to put words to the fact that I feel guilty for asking you to take time out of your day. You know, it's hard to put words to that and actually say that. So that's what's important about getting in touch with your emotions and kind of understanding where you're operating from. Because sometimes you can be, you know, you can just kind of be reactive in the relationship, and then suddenly you go, this isn't even about this person. This is just because I can hear my parents saying this, or I can hear, you know, my church elders saying this, and you're treating your partner in a different way that they don't necessarily deserve, or might be coming out of left field because you're feeling old guilt. So that's the first thing that came to my mind when I saw the word guilt. So I hope that's helpful. Going out as opposed to staying in. That was this. So going out versus staying in. Netflix and chill is super cool. I think, you know, it's wonderful to be able to have a night in and to feel comfortable and to cook together, and it's, you know, quiet, and you can talk and you can have your own music, and there's something really, really wonderful about that. But I do think that it's really important, particularly like if you got kids, you know, you want to make sure that you go out, and here's why. And it's important to dress up for each other, because when you go out, right, you are seeing each other out in the world. And it's really important to maintain that part of your relationship. That's why I sort of put relationships and dating together, because even in your relationship, you really could, there still should be some courtship. There still should always be I recognize you for the attractive man that you are. I recognize you for the attractive woman that you are. And I'm picking you up for a date, and we care. We're dressed up and we look good and we smell good. And that's a really hard thing to remember when you're so wiped out with kids and everything. Or, when you start to get really comfortable in the relationship, or if money's tight, but sometimes even if money's tight, you can just say, hey, let's get dressed up and go out and, use these free movie passes, or, go to McDonald's and, have a high school date. Like, you can still make it fun, even if money's tight. Like, I think that it's just important to go out in the world looking good and feeling good and witnessing each other that way. That's something that's really important. Okay. Great sex. Yes. To that I say yes. What else should I say? Okay. In a primary love relationship, that's the one place that you get to express your sexual side. And so it's easy to say, like, well, the sex isn't very good, but everything else is there. If the sex isn't very good, it needs to be addressed, and it needs to be worked on, because eventually that will catch up to you. Because ultimately, if it's not, and you stop having sex, now you just have a roommate, or you have like a business partner / somebody to share the bills with. And you're in a committed relationship where you can't express your sexuality anywhere else. So now what? Now the relationship becomes limiting. It becomes, oh gosh, but there's so many other good things here, but we're just really not good sexually together. People can grow sexually. You can get better at that. You can work on that. But the hardest thing to do is to acknowledge it and say, I want to make sure that our sex life is satisfying for both of us. Let's talk about it. And, it's a scary conversation to have, but if that conversation makes you hit a wall in the relationship, better now than later. So, personally, I think great sex is kind of important. So, this is the last one. G was a tough letter. We didn't have a lot. Graciousness. I love this one. Graciousness, which I also put grace. I think it's important in our relationships and in our friendships, and just, my God, out in the world, right, these days, to give each other some grace. This kind of goes back to, I think we talked benefit of the doubt, trusting each other's intent. I think it's funny because, we sort of want to be our best person for our partner in the relationship. And we want to be treated really well by our partner. That's why we've chosen them to be our life partner. And that's a great bar to set. But when we don't hit the bar, right, we got to give each other some grace. We've got to allow each other room to be human, room to be at fault, room to screw up, and not go into the there's a lot of talk about narcissists in relationship. It's sort of like a buzzword now, and everybody talks about what it's like to be in a relationship with a narcissist. You don't even have to be like a card-carrying narcissist to not trust somebody's intent and for that to start to do damage in the relationship. Because again, like somebody could be late, or they could stand you up for a date, or they could forget to call you. And instead of giving them some grace in the situation, you can still tell them you're disappointed and you really would like them to be more careful next time. But if you start going down the path of, how could you do that? You must not care about me if you did that. It becomes this character assassination. You're just an inconsiderate person. You don't care about anybody else, blah, blah, blah. Well, now you got to start pointing the finger at yourself, because you're not giving that person any room or any grace. Like, if you can trust their intent that they, in a perfect world would not have done that, and you can give them a little room, it doesn't mean that you can't express your disappointment. And in fact, it's important to, because you want them to know that they affect you. Sometimes when we're too forgiving all the time, and I don't mean forgiving, but when we're kind of a doormat, they almost don't feel like they have any effect on us. So it's really important for both people to express that they are affected by each other, but also to give each other some grace, give each other some room. I mean, you can practice it on the roads. You know, somebody cuts you off. They probably weren't interested in getting into an accident, and so they probably didn't really do it on purpose. Maybe you could just give them some grace and hope that they drive better for the rest of the day. How about that? So yeah, graciousness, very important. Is there something else that graciousness would have meant in relationship? I'm not sure. Picked it up off one of my threads. So that's the letter G for today. I hope you have a beautiful day, and please comment somewhere with letter H, because we got to do this again tomorrow. Hot. That's the first thing I thought. Hot. We'll go back from great sex to hot sex. We'll just talk about sex again. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you tomorrow for the letter H. Mwah. Bye.